Take me down to the river's edge. Take me down to the river's edge. Cleanse my soul in healing waters.
I had just moved to New York. And when I moved to New York, I had rented my office, put my counseling practice in there. And as I had rented this space out, it was on the second floor of the Hicksville building. I had went and I was going to pay my deposit and my rent. And I wrote the check out. And the landlord looked at me and he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." He said, "I can't take a personal check. I need a business check." And I said, "Okay, not a problem." I said, "Well, I'm going to run up to the bank." And I said, "I have to open up my new business account for my new office." And I was proud of that, and I went up there and I put my money in the bank. I had them order me some nice, pretty checks. And as I walked out that day, I went back to the office and I walked over to the building manager and I said, I cut out one of the counter checks that they had given me and I wrote the business account. He said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, we can't accept counter checks." He said, "It's not a big deal." He said, "Just wait for your checks to arrive." And he said, "Everything will be okay. I'm not worried, so why should you?" So I set on my way and I had decided that was going to be the solution. I would wait for the checks. I called up to the bank and I said, "How long is it going to take for my checks to arrive?" And they said they should be there in 5 to 10 days. And I understood that meant business days, so I was looking at 2 weeks. And so as I prepared, I went about my business. Now I'm halfway through my first month of leasing the office space and I had no checks. So I waited for the third week to come up on us and there were no checks. And so I called the bank and they said, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're going to have to call the printing company." And they gave me an 800 number. Now we've all been at that 800 line trying to get through the queue. So I called up that 800 number, and as I dialed that 800 number, there was somebody who came on the phone, and they said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Dr. Hibbs. We're going to take care of this. They actually shipped out yesterday, I see here, so you should have them any day now." Another week went by, and I still didn't have any checks to pay the rent. Now a month had gone by, and now my second month's rent was due, and I still had not paid for the first month. And I'm starting to get a little anxiety, waiting for the building manager to go, "You know what? You're going to have to move on." So I'm getting nervous, and as the excitement's building and the anxiety's building, I take and I call the check company up again. And as I call the check company up, I dial that 800 number. I go through the queue. I get to a customer service rep, and as they're sitting there looking, they said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." They said somebody had made a mistake, and your checks did not print. And I'm sitting there going, "Okay." And I know that no matter what happens right now, nothing is going to help what's about to happen here. So I said, "Okay, how can we fix this?" Now, I'm frustrated. I'm angry. And she said, "How about if I have them printed and expedited to you, and we're going to ship them to you out overnight, free of charge? Would that help you?" And I said, "That would help me a great deal." I felt like I was getting something. I was happy. They were happy. So I hung the phone up and I said, "Okay, now it's good to go." And then the next week goes by and I still didn't have any checks. So now I'm up to about a month and a half to a month and 3 weeks into my lease, still not having paid anything. And I keep going to the landlord going, "You know, I promise you I've ordered the checks." It's kind of like one of those things, "Oh, the check's in the mail." Yeah, and so I'm feeling really bad and everything. So now, about a month and 3 weeks I'm into this, and I call up that 800 number, and this time I've got a hold of the phone and my grip is tight. And as I'm holding it up there, I'm ready to fight. And I get on there, and as soon as the individual answers the phone, it was a young guy, he answers the phone, he says, "How can I help you?" And I start yelling at him, telling him I don't have my checks, I ordered them, you told me 7 to 10 days. And he says, "Well, let me pull the account up." He looks at it and he says, "I'm sorry, sir, they didn't ship out, but I can ship them out very quickly." And I start screaming at him, "You're a liar, you guys lie, you're no good." And then the frustration began to pour out as I yelled at this young guy who probably had no clue who I was or what had happened the month before. And as I was yelling, I said, "So what you're going to tell me is a lie." I said, "That's all you're doing." And he stopped. He said, "You're absolutely right. I'm nothing but a liar." He said, "And what I'm about to tell you right now, it's a lie, so don't believe me." And as I caught myself, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking I'm sitting here yelling at a stranger who I have no clue who he is, who probably doesn't even have a clue, doesn't probably really care that I didn't get my checks. And I said, "I'm sorry." I said, "I realize it's not your fault." And I said, "I'm sorry to take my frustration out on you." And he said, "Not a problem." He said, "But here's my direct extension." And he said, "Why don't we make sure that these go out? You call me tomorrow and I'm going to tell you where the progress is at. And the 48 hours from now, you're going to have your checks. And if you don't have them, we're going to make sure that you've got my number so you're talking directly to me. And after that, I'm going to go ahead and order you another batch of checks that's going to be free." And I said, "Well, thank you. 48 hours, I have my check."